everyone. Welcome to session 2 of today, which is our scripting masterclass. Our speaker today is the host of Cine Maya, a podcast that is hosted on IVM. Swati's background is in film and media, and she's a researcher at the University of Westminster. Swati has also worked with the BBC World Service, Doordarshan News, and All India Radio before. And even though her podcasting stint started in 2019, she's an expert in sound and audio. So, Swati, thank you so much for taking time to be with us here today. And, we look forward to your session.
Thank you so much, Naga. And I'm not going to go into the details of explaining all my designations with all the organizations that I've worked. But yes, podcasting actually started in 2018. And I worked with IVM Podcasts for a period of 6 months. And there I was heading the entire podcast production process. And I am really thankful for everyone who has joined in. This is Sunday afternoon, and of course, we are going to have our coffee and chai in some time. Probably I'll also have it. But I am really thankful that you are taking out time to listen to me, and I will not waste any more second and share my screen. Please let me know in the chat section if you can see my screen. Yes? Okay. All right. So now the first thing about scripting for podcasting, because everything that I'm going to talk about today is based on my own experience. Nothing is fiction. Everything is based on real life experience and writing for various platforms. By platforms, I mean I work for radio and television, and then when all the digital mediums started coming in because all the media was not digital initially when we started working. I'm working for like a decade now, and we had to transition from one medium to another, and we wanted to understand the modalities of each and every platform. So writing for the year is basically coming from radio. People who have worked in that medium, they know this is the term which we use. And because podcasting is related to radio in the sense whether you want to address it or not or agree with it or not, but podcasting is actually radio's exotic cousin because of the reach and the new kind of atmosphere and the audience which it has got because of the digital platform. But it is essentially related to radio in various different ways. And I would also like to ask one simple question to you, because yesterday my experience tells me that many of the attendees are already doing something in terms of podcasting. I started doing podcasting recently and try to understand the medium to differentiate it from radio, because it's essential to understand two mediums differently. But my question to you is, what do you do when you start your process of scripting? What is the first thing that comes to your mind, or how does it start for you? Anyone who can tell me? I'm waiting. Okay, so Aarti says theme, and O2Pod says the premise of the show. Julian says you need, oh God, it's really fast. Sunil says impact. All right. So there are various research and the guest, Chayan Katuria. All right. So there are various different ways of thinking about it, right? So that's where I would begin. And that's the wonderful, it's actually wonderful to know that everyone is on the same page when it comes to thinking about the script, because scripting begins in your head. It's not on the piece of paper. It's not, because it is in your head. And that is where everything begins. Thinking about it, researching, and questioning. And questioning, actually, the other day I was chatting with someone, and they asked me a question, and they were like, sorry for this weird question. I said, no, everything begins with question. So questioning is very important. Like I started with a question to you. And all these processes are actually the first step towards writing. You cannot write without thinking, without researching, without questioning. But questioning whom and what sort of questions? That's very important because we are surrounded with so much of information, and we are surrounded with so many areas and subject, so many things that attract us, and so many disciplines, just hobbies, our expertise, or something that just tickles a bone, but we do not know anything about it. So those kind of things, we have to understand which one is actually is going to take a form of a show, a podcast. Some helpful questions. Now, I'm actually trying to understand here that all the people who have joined in today are not from audio background, and some of us are actually trying to begin to do something. So these things are actually going to help those people specifically who haven't done any work with audio and who want to do it. And at the end of this presentation, I also have kind of a template script which will help anyone kickstart their show if they want to do it. Now, some helpful questions in the sense that these are when I write, or when we write for radio or audio medium, these are the key questions that one has to address, and we have to understand that why we are going to do this. What am I going to write? Why do I want to write it? And who am I writing it for? And these three questions are very much connected to each other, connected to the entire medium, what it stands for. For example, what am I going to write? That decides your interest and your genre as well. Genre or theme, as someone pointed out, that you begin thinking about the theme. So this is where you start. What am I going to write about? So is it going to be something like a broad area of history? Then you narrow down. So everything begins with, this process of what we call deduction, that you begin with a general idea and you reach to a specific point where you say, okay, this is going to be my show. That's where you decide, what am I going to write? Then why do I want to write it? Everything has a purpose. It's not about reforming the society, but it's about why do I want to tell this? If I want to tell a story, why do I want to tell this? This is also related to your format of the show and other things which I'm going to talk about. So why do I want to write it? Because I have something really smart and intelligent and a piece of information or a talent that I want to share with the wider world. Or I have something which will let me explore from the point where I am right now. Right. So it's a kind of exploration that you're going to do as you move along with your podcast. You know a bit of it, but this will give you an opportunity. So kind of exploration. Okay. Who am I writing it for is the most important aspect of it. That's your audience, your target audience. And that's related to the other important aspect of it. Apart from the writing process of the show format, that this is the format. And the format is basically in two senses that we are going to come to. But format and genre. This is one form of format or genre. It's very confusing for some people when they talk about audio and they talk about format or genre. So format is the way your script is written, is also format. But format is a generic term for genre as well. That it's history, it's science, it's natural sciences, it's crime, anything. So just pay attention to the question, what am I going to write? Why do I want to write it? These two questions, and relate to them. Am I explaining? That decides your genre. Non-fiction, news, current affairs, lifestyle, human interest stories. Am I entertaining? That goes into something like fiction. It can be any other innovative form which you decide. That's like completely on your imagination. But these things are essential when you begin to think about your script. Right. If I'm going to make a non-fiction show or a news and current affairs show or human interest stories, I am not fictionalizing. So, if I'm not fictionalizing, it means I have a scope which is defined by certain things which I cannot play with. And that's not the case with fiction. So, fiction gives you kind of freedom which non-fiction and news and current affairs and people's life related incidents would not give you. Of course, it will have creativity. I'm saying in terms of facts. So that is where other things come into picture in your script. And that's okay. I would just put it here, this one. Sorry, this slide I wanted to use. So when you think about these things, the next thing that you have to think about is, now you have decided that these are the formats or genre that I'm going to write my program in, my show in. Now, how am I going to write? That's the question of language. And also the third one that I mentioned, who am I going to write it for? My audience. Language is very much related to that. Now, that's a very tricky part for digital, because nobody actually knows who is listening to you. In radio, the best part about radio, I would say, from my own experience, is that because you know that this is a particular frequency, imagine it's shortwave or FM, they have different frequencies and they reach out to different areas, and you know it. As a radio broadcaster, you know that this is my area of reach. This is the kind of people that I'm talking to. This is the language that they speak. This is their cultural value. I know everything about that. So the language is a cultural aspect of your programming, your show, and that is where it comes into picture. This is all true for radio and any audio medium. It's not particularly podcasting. It's a generic thing that everyone who is writing the script has to keep in mind. It has to be conversational. Like I'm talking to you. So when I do a podcast, it has to be in this language. It cannot be like I become something else. I can become something else, but that is going to be for a brief period of time. I cannot fake it. So that's not going to happen. That's why it's conversational. And we're always told in our training in radio, we were told that always tell a story like you're telling it to somebody who's younger to you. So somebody who's younger to you, you automatically imagine that you have to explain it to them. Now that's a very kind of patronizing idea, but that's how they explain it to you in terms of understanding it. Easy to comprehend, in no use of jargons, which means that even if you're doing, a specialist show in the sense that I have heard a couple of podcasts which are like science podcasts. So I'm out and out a humanities person. So for me, science is something like really, I don't have a term for that, but something which is not my everyday usual thing. So certain podcasts use such hard language that, you have to go back to the starting point to understand it again, even if you have heard the entire show. So that kind of thing. Jargons are fine if you are explaining and the show is in the format where you have promised that you're going to use jargons and decode them. So that's how it's going. It's important. Theater of sound, it's a very common term for radio. It means that you have sound at your hand and you can use it the way you want. Now, sound is not only sound effects. Sound is basically the word that you are using is sound, a clip that you will use is sound, and the words that you're going to utter are sound. So all this makes your sound, one composite sound of the show. That's what is meant by sound. Different ingredients coming together make a theater of sound, and that's what audio is. So I would not say that podcasting particularly is theater of sound, because it is not that kind of medium. It's a more informal, more democratic medium where anyone can do anything they want without taking a reference from radio particularly. But essentially, if you want to create that kind of impact, Theatre of sound is is this particular term that we have to keep in mind, that our only resource in audio is sound, and that's what we're going to use the way you want to use it. That is where your language comes into picture, that you have to write. I heard initial few minutes of Chavi's session where she was talking about intros, and I absolutely agree with her on the point where she said that, start immediately. You don't have to create a theater of sound in podcasting, but it gives you a sense that you can actually do that as well with your script, right? Now, word as image. It means that you have to create a kind of image for your audience, which you have in your mind. They can't enter into your mind. But if you're creating a show which is meant to do something, it should do it, and it can do only through word. So choosing that language, choosing those words which will create that image in their mind. I'm sure we cannot, as broadcasters, we cannot transfer or, through telepathy or something, we cannot actually transfer that image from our head to somebody who is listening to us. But we can definitely try doing that through our language. And that is where your target audience imagination comes into picture in the script. Okay, how does it work? It works like, if my target audience, I'm doing a show which I think I'm doing it for somebody sitting in Bombay, I'm doing it for somebody in, up north in UP, or in south in Tamil Nadu. So I have to know that, what kind of terminology people use there, so that I can incorporate it in my script so that it relates to people who are listening to me. And that's very important to connect. That's how your intros would connect. Even if if in intro, you have, like, say, you're starting in like 30 seconds intro you're doing. In those 30 seconds, only those words would connect to people who they're familiar with. You cannot use a word from Russian language and expect people to understand it in the intro. That's probably in the body part, but not in the intro. So that's how the word is used for creating an image. It is related to the cultural part of it, the cultural part of your audience. And the last is the language of digital medium. Now, I specifically, having worked in different mediums, I understand that digital has kind of given you an opportunity to play around with language. And you can actually use your SMS language as well, or the language of meme. Meme definitely is visual medium, but how to translate that visual medium into audio medium is a challenge. But digital has its own aesthetic of language, and that one has to understand. So people who have started working in radio in 70s or 80s, or we started working in 2000s, the language has changed a lot. And we cannot use the same, suppose, because I have been a Hindi broadcaster and I understand how Hindi has changed over these years. So we no longer use the kind of words we used to use in 1990s, probably, because they are no longer they are there, they are alive very much, but they're not in the public domain the way they used to be. So that is what is important in terms of understanding the language of digital medium, because you're catering to the medium. And if you I'm sure you have come across this, medium is the message. So medium is your message, which means that your language is going to be the medium's language. And that's what is important in understanding your target audience and your scripting as well. Now, I'm coming to the most formal part of scripting. I just wanted to give this session a very personal kind of experience, in the sense that what I have learned over the years. So I wanted to share that part, because it's a very personal medium. Ultimately, podcast is very personal medium, because it's not like community listening. So it's intimate listening. It's very personal. And that's why it has to come from the heart. That's what this session is all about. Now, ways of scripting. This is the formal part of it. Ways of scripting, why it is important before going on to the format of scripting, which I will show to you definitely. But it is important to think about this because not everyone is going to do things in a similar manner. Every child is different, every human being is different, every adult, every older person, everyone is different. They would do things differently. So there is no one form that fits everyone. Now, these are some of the things that you can actually take reference from. Pointers for personal reference based on the episode content. Now, imagine that you have decided everything. This is my format. Okay, this is the kind of language. It's going to be English. It's going to be Sanskritized. It's going to be very rich in Tamil vocabulary. Or it's going to be, inspired from Russian novels, whatever it is. You've decided on that. These two things are on the plate. Now, the third thing is that how are you going to maintain that? How are you going to do when you're recording? These are the things that you can do. Personal reference, for that, you can keep like Q notes or you can keep a paper. A4, whatever we do. I definitely do not recommend doing it on the computer, but if you are capable of doing that, that's also fine. But your connection to mic, actually it becomes really disturbed when you're looking into your computer screen, and it's not a good idea to do it. So better take a piece of paper. That's very old school, but that's how it is. And it works really well for most of the people. So that's one thing. Second is prepared questions for interviews. That's structured. So now structured and unstructured are two forms of interviews that you do. If anyone is not clear at any point, they can let me know. Although I can't see the screen in the sense that I can't see you writing something. I can only see my screen, but you can...
Don't worry, Swati. I will be the bridge.
Okay. Right. So that's one way of doing your script. Okay. That can be your script. It's nothing like it has to have an intro. It has to have, first thing, second thing, third thing. That can also happen, but completely personalized. Second is if you're doing it it's completely interview based show. This has nothing to do with one person sitting and writing a script and then presenting it. If it's not that traditional way of doing it, and if it's interview, then I would not say that you do not need a script for that. You definitely need a script, because ultimately when you're sitting to record, it should not be like in your head, you're thinking, oh my God, what is going to be the next question? That doesn't happen when you have worked for like some time. That's completely fine. But when you are beginning to do that, do not do that. It just shakes your confidence when you're not able to record properly, and when you feel like, oh, it's not what I want to do. So structured in the sense that write questions, but maybe not in the way you're going to put them, but definitely something which gives a cue to the next question that you're going to raise. Because sometimes definitely you know your interviewee beforehand, but sometimes you do not know them. And when you're interviewing them, then you'll feel a great trouble, in navigating that interview if you have nothing written. So questions is another form of personal way of scripting. Segment-wise points, that works like reminder, in the sense that you have a show where you have decided, okay, I'm going to talk about two things in my show. Segment 1, segment 2. Now, what is going to come in segment 1? Because when you sit on the table to record, or wherever you are sitting, you cannot just look around for, oh, where is my next thought coming from which direction? That cannot happen. This way of making segment-wise point actually gives you a confidence that, oh, I know my business and I can do it, and you will definitely end up doing it. Then reference material to use. Imagine you're doing a show which is very philosophical or maybe historical or something, and you want to use quotes and poetry. So keep that handy. Maybe you have become confident that you can improvise, although improvisation for the entire show can never be a good idea. I mean, I'm telling that from my personal experience. The moment you sit to record, your mind just goes blank. That happens generally. So some sort of reference material, some cue, something in front of your eyes is always helpful. Written form of cues, definitely. That's also again going to be cue, personalized cues, which is I have seen some broadcasters, what they do is, I'm using the term broadcasters, someone might get annoyed with that, but podcasters, okay. So I have seen broadcasters. So most of the people who sit in front of the mic, they basically use cue cards, so that they keep it in front of colorful cue cards in front on the table, and they have become very smart to use them. That comes with practice, by the way. I can't use cues. I have to have a written script. So cue is another thing that if you are really comfortable, you can use it. Just write words, maybe like definitions, words, something like that, which gives you a cue. And word-to-word script, although it's rarely, that's why I've written it, that it's rarely used while recording. Although I'm one of those people, I have to admit that I'm one of those people who write my script from A to Z. Although I might not use it, I might not even look at it, but that gives me confidence as I sit for recording, and that's very important. Because confidence is everything. I'm telling you, this morning only I was telling my husband that, I have this talent of reading everything smoothly, even if it is wrong. So that's how it is. That's how it works. I'm not telling you to do that, but I'm just giving you this sense that confidence is really important. And that comes through various different ways of scripting for yourself. I'll just get some water for myself. Sorry.
Swati, there was one question.
Yeah.
Chayan asks, is this supposed to be in a particular order? I think for your ways of scripting, right? So he's asking, is this supposed to be in a particular order?
No. This is actually based on the level of experience you have in terms of recording. So it's basically, you can choose anything from this. There is no order. Anything that works for you. For me, like I said, the thing which is written right at the end, word-to-word script, rarely used while recording, but I do that. Even after 10 years of recording, I do that because that's my comfort zone. I have to have a written sheet in front of me because, it gives me this feeling that I have something to fall back on, because I would not be looking around for help. So that's how it works. And you can use whatever works for you. That's why I've put in all these things that came to my mind looking around people for so many years, that how they have broadcasted in front of my eyes. So I've worked with people who have worked for like 40, 50 years, and still they write their script word to word. And that makes them actually, they are some of the best broadcasters. And that is what is important. That your comfort zone. So they still, at the age of 65, broadcasting for 40 years, they still feel that writing is essential, and they write with pen and paper. They don't type. That's I think it's another whim, but you don't have to do it. But yes, choose what works for you. Now.
Okay, so there's one, the follow-up from Chayan is that he's asking, the order of questions. The structured script that you prepare has to be in a certain order, right?
Yes, definitely. That is that's going to be, structured interview is going to be in some order. That order can be, okay, you're asking that. That order can be basically from present to past or past to present. That again depends on you. It's like, a feature film. So remember any film. Try to remember any film where, a shot comes in the beginning, which is actually the end of the show, which is actually the end of the film. So they show that first shot to you in the beginning, and then the entire film goes, and then that shot comes back. Okay, so there is actually no way of doing it, but then there is a way of doing it. You structure it in a way which is the most exciting thing about that person. It can be anything, and usually it comes from it can be from the professional life, from personal life, something that you read somewhere. But a structure has to be there, like a beginning, a middle, and an end to it. Interview has its own body. It's a body. So think about it. Where do I begin so that this body has, it flows in a certain manner? So you will decide the structure of it, and you get to know it. When you begin to work on it, you get to know that.
Got it. Do you want to take some more questions, or you want to go ahead?
I can take the questions, no problem.
Okay. So Shainu has two questions. So first one is, how do you know the story you had was a good one? And then the second question is, since podcasts are for intimate listening, what qualities should the characters in your story have to make it agreeable with your listener?
Okay, now the first question was about
how do you know that the story you had was a good one?
Was a good one. For me, it works like I am the first audience. If it's not, you get to know that through your own gut feeling, in the sense that you probably when you think about a character, you think about the entire background of that character, where it comes from, the language that he or she speaks, the values that this person has, the work that they do, and automatically you think about whether anyone would be interested in knowing more about them or not. And it depends upon the layers of the character. It's not about making the character exotic in terms of, I don't know how to put it in words, that how do you so it's basically about the layers that you put into that character, or you can think about that character. Imagine this is about me. So I am a person who comes from a particular background in terms of my social background, cultural background, my philosophy, my orientation, my problems. I think you get to know that if I'm going to tell this story to somebody who has a similar kind of relatable environment, whether they're going to be interested in that or not. And the second thing to test is to tell that story to similar, not your friends, but a focus group kind of people. A focus group which can actually tell you that what do they think about it. Maybe share it in a group which does similar kind of things, and you can get to know that. Most of the feature films, I know, initially when the first cut of the film is made, they actually show it to focus group. We don't get to know that, but they create a focus group in which the film is shown, and then they get the feedback, and that is how the films are actually, sometimes the scripts are changed. So that's how it works. And the second question was about, Naga?
So the second question was around, how do you make your podcast, I think this question is for a fictional podcast. They're asking, how can you make your story agreeable with your listeners, since podcasting is such an intimate format?
I don't think so. Agreeable is something that you should look for, because it's basically about how you're telling the story. It's not about making your character agreeable. It's not about, I don't know. I do not agree with this idea of making something agreeable. It is about knowing the audience. It's ultimately about the target audience who you understand well. Because when I conceive a show, when I conceptualize a program, I should know my audience. And then anything that you put out is going to be agreeable. That's what we believe in, because we do not go and research, and we do not survey, but we understand the cultural and social circumstances. Imagine that somebody is writing a story on these days we have seen a couple of podcasts coming on domestic violence. So why so many things on domestic violence came about at this particular point in time? Because in lockdown we heard so many stories, there were so many reports, journalistic articles and everything, features saying that domestic violence has increased in lockdown, during lockdown. And that's when, so many other people started working on these things. So that's how it works. It becomes agreeable when it relates. It relates to your circumstances. It relates to real life. It relates to people. That's when it becomes agreeable.
Got it. Do you want to take some more questions, or we'll continue? I think we can come back to questions a little bit later. There are lots.
Yes. Okay. So I'll just finish with this and then we can take questions.
Sure.
Okay. So this was the last slide. Now the next slide is script and elements. We all know in audio, we do not have many elements, and even lesser in podcasting because podcasting has been a medium which has challenged radio on this ground, I think, because radio has its own tantrums, no sound from here, good recording, and radio has a format, radio has an identity. Suppose not everyone can start radio, by the way. In India, you cannot broadcast news on FM radio. So radio has its own problems, which podcasting doesn't have. But your resource remains the same: words, sound effects, and clips. These are the only three things you can do. You can definitely use it as innovatively as possible, in the sense that, writing is one important thing, that how you're going to write it, that depends upon your language. Language is just one thing, by the way. You can make it interesting in various different ways by maybe in a sense that you can use different voices in your own voice, if it is possible. That's one way of doing it, playing around with your own voice, a kind of fictional characters that you can create. You don't have to be completely in one narration mode, but that comes only in the fictional part of podcasting. That's not going to be when you are interviewing someone. You have just one voice and you cannot startle the other person with the other voice. So these are the things and the limitations and the powers that you have that you're going to use. Sound effects and music and everything coming together becomes your show. And the entire thing is how you put these limited things. With visuals, you have all the graphics and effects and everything. Here, you don't have that. So the way you put your words and your presentation, I'm not going to the presentation part of it because it's not very important in podcasting how you present it. It's all about informal way of doing it. So how you put words and sound effects and clips in an informal way is going to decide the way you will build your show. Okay. Now, in the most simplest terms, this is your script: intro, body, and outro. Intro, outro. I'm not going to go into the detail because Chavi has already spoken about it a little bit, and but I would definitely say that for me, intro is the most important part of a podcast because it can actually catch you, or you will actually drop out of it if within this music only, not even before you listen to the first few lines. I think for me the music works a lot, and initial 10 seconds are extremely important. So intro is not just your words, it's music as well. So be conscious about it. The body, where you can have segments, you can have main content, your ideas, your discussions, story, if it's fiction, interview, if it's non-fiction, anything that goes into body, and outro, which is coming out of it. So certain people take time to come out of, that sounds really wrong. Certain people take time to close it, but some people actually like to have a very lavish sort of closing, that this is the signature closing. But that depends entirely on you and the nature of your show. Like when I did my podcast, and if I have time, I'll probably play that part of it. But I did my podcast, I just said, thank you so much for coming. That's it. And the interviews ended. And it actually works well because, you think that this presenter is just crazy. They didn't say anything. But then later on, I added a couple of things because people told me that it doesn't sound nice. So that's how you learn. So this is the basic thing. Now, a generic script for you. This is a generic script for anyone who wants to start. I'm not saying that this is written in stone or anything. You have to, again, it's your choice. And this is just for reference. You start with music or musical jingle, whatever your resource is. If you have music, you can add. I'll play a clip where there's no music and the person starts, and it's absolutely astonishing because their voice is so nice. So that's negotiable. Then introduction. So that can be a monologue. If you're doing the show alone, then it's going to be one person talking to the mic. But if there are two people, double-headed, short and crisp introduction, which includes what is coming up. So you have to tell right in the beginning, this is what I'm going to give you. So stay with me. Then segue, music, sound effects, signature tune, whatever you have, whatever you can do. Like it doesn't have to be something extremely, made by Zubin Mehta or someone. No, it can be anything. Just a transition, like a 2-second transition can also work in certain ways. And I'm talking about just a 15-minute thing, by the way. If you're doing 30 minutes, then accordingly. First topic, 4-5 minutes. I don't think it's a good idea to talk beyond 5 minutes, in the sense that if it is 15 minutes and you have segments which are different from each other, that is where the nature of podcast comes into picture, what you have decided. Maybe in an interview also you can break at some point, but I have heard most of the interviews go on for like 30 minutes. My own show was going on for 30 minutes. I don't know, they might have put segments later on for advertising purpose, but we were not doing it at that point. Okay. Then again, you segue into the second segment. Then segment 2 for 5 minutes. Add an announcement, show trailer, show related info or advertisement. This is basically to give a kind of, breathing space to people so that they can just breathe while you begin your next segment. And this is also a chance for people to join in or go away also, whether you're losing them or you're gaining more people. That also happens. Then again, music, then segment, then closing. Tease the next show with a clip or closing, music, jingle, or signature tune. This is roughly your script, which anyone can follow to begin with, and then you can experiment as you go along and as you become comfortable. I think I'm running out of time. Sorry. These are my examples, but I'm not sure if I can play them. Can I play them?
Sure. Please do.
Okay, so I will begin with something that uses music initially and something that doesn't use music.
Okay.
Is my screen visible?
Yeah.
This is a very famous, in fact, this is where everything started. Serial. If you haven't heard this is in its 3rd season now. It's crime podcast, and it turned around things for everyone. So this is the first episode of this series.
This is a global Tel-Link prepaid call from
Adnan Sayed,
an inmate at a Maryland Correctional Facility.
From This American Life and WBEZ Chicago, it's Serial, one story told week by week. I'm Sarah Koenig. For the last year, I've spent every working day trying to figure out where a high school kid was for an hour after school one day in 1999. Or if you want to get technical about it, apparently I do, where a high school kid was for 21 minutes after school one day in 1999. This search sometimes feels undignified on my part. I've had to ask about teenagers' sex lives, where, how often, with whom, about notes they passed in class, about their drug habits, their relationships with their parents. And I am not a detective or a private investigator. I'm not even a crime reporter. But yes, every day this year, I've tried to figure out the alibi of a 17-year-old boy. Before I get into why I've been doing this, I just want to point out something I'd never really thought about before I started working on this story. And that is, it's really hard to account for your time in a detailed.
Sorry, I just wanted to make you listen to this because it starts with music. It goes on to explain what the story is all about and what they're doing. So it's an investigative podcast. It's basically investigative journalism, this entire series. And they will, in next shows, when you listen to it, you would probably, some of you would go back to it and listen to it. What they do is in every next episode, they do a recap for the last episode. And that's how they try to gain more and more people. They try to hook people so that when you gain your new audience in the second episode, the second episode, the person is trying to think, oh, I don't know what has happened in the last episode. So you're not losing them. They will definitely go back and listen to it. So that's what the intro is doing in this particular podcast. Now, the second one is it's about a very powerful person in America. He was quite corrupt, and Jeffrey Epstein. I'm not sure if you've read about him, but if you can go back to this podcast, you can listen to it. The Mysterious Mr. Epstein. And this podcast starts just without saying anything else, without music, without any particular clip or anything. Just listen to it.
I think the politicians who represent us also represent the best of us. But in the case of Italy's former, we'd like to think the politicians who represent us also represent the best of us. But in the case of Italy's former Prime Minister, Silvio Berlusconi, that hope turned out to be false, and it cost the Italians dearly. Bunga Bunga, a new Wondery original miniseries hosted by Whitney Cummings, tells the story of how one master manipulator hypnotized an entire country while engulfed in criminal scandals. If billionaire media mogul Silvio Berlusconi lived by one tenet of business, it was this: when it comes to your bottom line, there are no rules, which is why...
Okay, so this is their second episode actually. Now I'll play the first one.
This is Tim Livingston, host of the new Tenderfoot TV podcast, Whistleblower. As a fan of both sports and true crime, it's my pleasure to bring you this incredible story. To give you more insight into the scandal that I've been chasing for 8 years, here's Sopranos star Michael Imperioli.
What if the biggest scandal in American sports history was even bigger than we thought? In 2007, NBA referee Tim Donaghy was caught betting on games that he refereed. But he wasn't just putting a few pennies in his piggy bank. No, he was at the center of a multi-billion-dollar scheme, making big money for who else? The mafia. The NBA said it was just Donaghy, just one bad apple. But according...
All right. So, 2 podcasts. They're using all the elements, the similar kind of elements, music and text, whatever the word is, and everything is written. It sounds as if it's not written, but everything is written in this podcast. I can tell from the recording. And you can the way that you use music. So they haven't used music as something which is done to attract your attention. It's very much part of the podcast. And this is what I say, personalization. You do not need to have something. I said that for me, the initial 10 seconds of music works, but not in this case, because in this case, the voice works. And that's what is important. But when I did my show and I want to just play this particular episode, the last episode of my podcast, where you'll see that whatever I have spoken about till now all goes into this, and that's how I thought about it. Maybe the next time when I do a show, I would not do it like this. Sorry, it's in Hindi, and anyone who doesn't understand Hindi, I'm sorry about this, but I wanted to play this just to relate to the context. जिंदा दिली, हौसले और इरादों की बातें होती हैं इस खास पॉडकास्ट पर जिसका नाम है सिने माया। बैठक तैयार है, सभी सुनने वालों का खैर मकदम। मैं हूं स्वाति बख्शी। हमारे आज की जो मेहमान है उनकी लिखी और निर्देशित दूसरी फिल्म 2016 में आई थी जिसने सेंसर बोर्ड को बहुत तकलीफ दी। नतीजतन बोर्ड ने फिल्म को लेडी ओरिएंटेड करार देते हुए सर्टिफिकेट नहीं दिया। हालांकि फिल्म 2017 में रिलीज हुई, लेकिन राह के इन कांटों ने इन्हें रोका नहीं है, बल्कि इनके अंदर की आग को भड़का दिया। हम पूछेंगे इनसे कि इस हिम्मत का राज क्या है, क्योंकि एक नई फिल्म पर काम कर रही हैं जो और भी दिलचस्प लगती है। अलंकृता श्रीवास्तव, बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया। 5 महीने और 50 मिनट के बाद आप और मैं आज आमने सामने बैठे हैं। All right. So here, the music, everything, the intro, everything has happened within 1 minute, and that's how we imagine our shows. When we start doing like 30 minutes show, we have to be very careful that our body is going to take the maximum amount of time, and our intro is going to be within 1 minute or 1 minute 30 seconds. We cannot go beyond that. And I would just play someone's podcast who has never done a podcast before, and they also use a similar kind of music oriented. I'm sorry if I'm taking much time, Naga.
I think we have another 10 minutes.
10 minutes, okay. Where is this British Council coming from? So this is like a distribution company, and they did a show. They did it for the first time. This person who is doing the show has never done anything before, but successfully did it. It's like a 10-minute thing. So I'll just play initial 30 seconds. What's wrong? Why is it not playing? Sorry.
Hi, and welcome to the debut episode of Season 1 of GoQuest Roster. I'm your host Sagar from the International Sales team at GoQuest Media. In this first episode, we look at the love story of Nastya, a surgeon, and Maxim, a hitman in the Ukrainian romantic drama I'm on Your Side.
All right, so this is like a 10-minute thing, and in 27 seconds, you're done with your intro music and your introduction. So that's what probably is making clear that it depends upon the time that you have to incorporate everything that we're talking about. And these were the examples. You can go back to them. These are the things to remember. Personalize the script. It's completely you in the script and nobody else. And if there are 2 people, then both of them. Learn from those you like. Go back to them, listen to them. That's very important. Write as you talk. I always talk and then write. That's how a conversational script can be written. You speak first and then write it down. Don't write it and then speak. That's not going to work. You're your first audience, as I said. If your ear is not liking it, probably it's not that great. Record and listen to yourself. That's extremely important. Give yourself a chance to improve. That's going to happen only if you record and listen and you follow everything else. Practice. I do not have a substitute. Definitely. Practice has no substitute, and you can practice the way you want in front of the mirror, in the bathroom, anywhere you like. That's all from me. And I am coming back on Air Meet. Probably I'll stop sharing. Yes.
Awesome. Thank you for that amazing session, Swati. I think there are some questions that I will now pull in Seth to moderate with you, and also give some context for our attendees.
Yes. Hi, Seth.
Hello, you hear me okay? Okay. Good afternoon.
Yes. How are you?
Good. Thank you for that great session. And I'll quickly get on to some questions that people have lined
We're
up.
fine. Surviving.
So one of the first one we have here is from Deepa. So interview-based formats, apart from listing the questions, does scripting start before or after the recording? That's a little strange, but
No, actually, that's also your comfort zone. Basically, when you are researching for your questionnaire, you basically make note of things that you're going to incorporate in your script. So that's actually the beginning of your script. You are thinking about your script and it's starting in your head, and probably you have, by the time you finished your interview, you already have your introduction, on paper. That happens. And I would definitely recommend writing it later on, because once you listen to the answers, probably you'll have something more than what you thought about initially. So once you're done with your interview, then do the final script for your show. That helps a lot.
okay, good feedback. Second, I think this is going back to your reference made. I think you made a reference about using pen and paper, right, for jotting things down.
Yes.
So somebody's asking, it's Julian, who's asking, does a browser teleprompter help smoothing the delivery flow?
It depends, because teleprompter actually is a very technical thing, and in teleprompter you're actually told to look at, no, that's when you're presenting, but no, I don't think so it's going to help, because you will be focused on teleprompter, not on the way you're delivering. You will be looking at the line which is coming up, rather than trying to focus on how you're sounding and how you're going to present it. So I don't think any technical aid which is going to take your attention away from your own words and your own style of presentation is going to help in any way, whether it's teleprompter or it's your phone. Imagine that if I'm looking at looking at a screen, your mic is here, you're looking at your screen, and by the time you're trying to read, you'll go like that and you don't know where your voice is. So I don't think it's helpful at all, because news, like if you have a piece of paper, you can keep it like that, but phone, keeping it like that, if you can do it, it's good. If you can't, then it's not helpful.
Okay. Depends on your comfort level. Also, I guess if you've been using this in the past, then definitely give it a try. But Swati's mentioned what's worked well for her. There's another longish one. Let me see if this is a question or a comment. Okay, it is a question. COVID lockdown, I guess it's during COVID lockdown, I read, and because of visual fatigue, many have been exploring podcasts in India. How long should podcasts be ideally for such listeners who are in transit from, say, video to podcasts?
What's the question?
So the person is making, it's from Podmira Shino, I guess. He's making a comment that a lot of the transition that's been having during COVID is from video to podcast listening, right, to audio.
Yes.
So for such people who are in transition, what should be an ideal length of a podcast?
I think begin with 15 minutes. 15 minutes is good enough. You don't get exhausted and you don't have to source a lot of material, because 30 minutes is long. It is long and it requires a lot of work when you're doing 30 minutes. Begin with 15, 20, and then go on to 30 minutes if you have material to do that. But 30 is good. We have done podcasts even for like 8, 9, 10 minutes as well. 10 minutes is also good. If you have good content that can, do justice just in 10 minutes, that's good enough to start.
Yeah, definitely. And I'd just chime in and add my 2 cents. Usually, as long as you're adding value, it doesn't really have to be 10 minutes or 1 hour long. If you're trying to squeeze in, say, 30 minutes worth of content and value in 10 minets, it'll fail. And if you're trying to elongate 10 minutes worth of content to 1 hour, it'll also fail. So just keep it to as long as it needs to be, and no jibber jabber beyond or after that. So go by what works best and what gives value to the audience, I would say. One more is, for beginners, how to start is the biggest challenge. Any pointers to overcome that challenge?
Last question, guys. We'll break for like a small networking break after this.
Yeah, go ahead, Swati.
Okay, so I would say that you have to start with the first slide, if you remember, thinking, researching, and questioning. That's where you start. And then definitely the fourth step for a beginner would be to write it down. There is no substitute to writing. I would not say that, you just start your mic and start recording. That's not going to help. You have to, first of all, think what you want to do, research on it, make your notes, make points. This is what I want to do. It will become clearer and clearer as you start writing down, believe me. Because sometimes when we begin writing, then it becomes clear that, okay, this is what I wanted to do, but it's not clear. So let me go back to researching and then find more material and then make it concrete, like a concrete sort of thing, and then come back and do a show. So for beginners, thinking, researching, questioning, and writing. Writing is an added thing for you if you're just starting off.
Fantastic. Thanks, Swati. Thank you for that really insightful session. And I'll request you to hang around with us so that people can come talk to you at a table or at a speed networking session and ask you questions.
Yeah.
Sorry?
I'll just get coffee.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks again, Swati. Thank you so much for your time. We'll also, share the details of the recordings, etc. once all the event gets completed.
And I'll send this presentation if you want to share it with people. Anyone who wants it, they can have it.
Yes, please share it with me. Then I'll send it across to everyone as part of that email blast.